Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kevin Jarvis, and I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Malden. Welcome to today's dedication ceremony for the Corporal Ralph Kenty Memorial Square, which is right here, as you all can see, in a beautiful location not far from where he lived and his daughters and his parents lived. Ralph Kenty was born and raised in Malden on December 1st, 1943, to Ralph W. Kenty, whom a lot of you know, and his mother was Arlene M. Norton. At Malden High School, Ralph was the vice president of his junior class and also president of his senior class, graduating in 1963. Not only that, Ralph was a hockey star and an all-scholastic football player at Malden High School. During the 1962 Malden Medford Thanksgiving Day game, he made 18 unassisted tackles, an incredible feat. He was also a great hockey player and captain of the Malden High School hockey team. We'll talk more about Ralph in a minute, but before we get there, I'd like to just acknowledge a few people in the audience. State Senator Jason Lewis. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Mayor Gary Christensen to say a few words and introduce some of the dignitaries in the audience.
As we stand here together, I am reminded of the quote that our country is truly the land of the free because of the brave. Today we honor and pay tribute to the courageous decision of Ralph Kenty Jr. to serve our country. I did not personally know Ralph, but I know what he did and what he stood for. What truly impressed me when I read about him was that here was someone who had a tremendous high school career, being the class president and an all-scholastic football player, and then going on to college, where it seemed that the sky was the only limit. But regardless of all these successes, Ralph, without hesitation, enlisted with the United States Marine Corps. He did multiple tours of duty, with the final one changing his life forever. After being attacked, Ralph was severely injured, which eventually resulted in the loss of his left leg. But you would never know it, as he would state later on that he considered himself the luckiest guy in the world. Now, most of us would have understood if he withdrew from life based on his experience in Vietnam, but that was not Ralph. Rather, he came home to Malden and became a youth soccer coach, a member of the cemetery's board of trustees, a part of the disabled American veterans, veterans of foreign wars, and Vietnam War veterans. And he served as our assistant city clerk, where he was known as City Hall's most pleasant employee. The word hero is often defined as an ordinary person facing extraordinary circumstances and acting with courage, honor, and self-sacrifice. That describes Ralph Kenty Jr. And I am honored to have the opportunity to stand with his family and dedicate the Ralph Kenty Jr. Memorial Square so that future generations will also remember his bravery, his spirited determination, and most of all, his willingness to defend our nation. Thank you. And I want the family to know that I'm not alone in how I feel about Ralph Kenty Jr. We also are joined today by Representative Steve Ultrino. To my right, we have Ward 2 City Councilor Paul Condon, Councilor at Large Craig Spadafora, the Councilor from Ward 7, Neil Anderson, Councilor at Large Steve Winslow, and State Senator Jason Lewis. At this time, we would now like to call up our State Representative Steve Ultrino, who will be followed by State Senator Jason Lewis.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out today during this Memorial Day weekend. I've always been impressed with the work of Kevin Jarvis, so let's give him a round of applause. When I was on the city council, there was no one better that I could go to for my Citizens Award too when I was councilor if they had veteran questions for Kevin. Massachusetts is one of the only states that requires every cities and towns to have a veterans officer. Our benefits for veterans far outweigh any other state in this country. And just the other day, the House of Representatives passed a bill doubling the amount of money to help someone who has passed away, a veteran, from $2,000 to $4,000 for burial expenses, and also give job preferences for those veterans coming home from war today when it comes to training, education, EMT services. That's the least we could do for those veterans, especially those who gave the absolute sacrifice. So I want to thank and welcome the Kenty family back, and thank you for all of your service, and thank you to Kevin and our mayor for all that you do for our veterans. God bless.
I also want to thank the House state representatives and also state senators who enact and pass these laws for our veterans, and also the mayor and the city councilors who provide me with the necessary funds to take care of our wounded, our widows, and our veterans. At this time, I'd like to introduce a man who was born in another country, South Africa. Came here when he was a young boy, 10 or 12 years old, and is now your state senator, Jason Lewis.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. It's just such an honor to be able to join you on this very special occasion. I wasn't planning to bring this up, but Kevin mentioned the fact that I was born in another country, and I became a naturalized citizen when I turned 18. And every time I attend a ceremony like this, particularly when we celebrate Memorial Day and when we celebrate Veterans Day, I just can't tell you how proud I feel to be an American citizen. It really is a very, very special country that we're very lucky to live in and grow up in. And it's because of people like Corporal Kenty that this is the great country it is, because we wouldn't have the freedoms that we have, we wouldn't have our democracy, we wouldn't have freedom of speech and freedom of association and everything else that we sometimes take for granted if we didn't have brave men and women who were willing to go into battle and put their lives at risk, suffer terrible injuries as Corporal Kenty did. And so we know we owe them an incredible debt of gratitude. That's why this is a very appropriate and fitting tribute to Corporal Kenty. I want to say thank you to his family who are with us today, and friends and loved ones. Unfortunately, like the mayor, I never had a chance to know him personally, but I understand he was truly a remarkable person. And now there will be lots of young people who will pass by here in the years to come and will see this sign, and hopefully they will ask, who was Corporal Kenty? And maybe they will take the time to learn of his story and his sacrifice and his commitment to public service. So thank you all very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Kevin, for the wonderful work you do with our veterans, and hope everybody has a very happy Memorial Day weekend. Thank you.
After 2 years of playing football at Parsons College in Iowa, Ralph enlisted in the United States Marine Corps on October 18, 1966, and served as an 0311. That's a combat infantryman, a grunt. But all Marines are infantrymen until they get assigned to be cooks or helicopter crew chiefs or tankers. And when a tank breaks down, they're an infantryman. In Vietnam, Ralph was assigned to Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment with the 1st Marine Division. Ralph Kenty had already survived the siege at Quezon during the Tet Offensive, but on November 2nd, 1968, Ralph was traveling with his fellow Marines in a helicopter on yet another combat mission, flying out of Da Nang to a village called Nguyen Kinh Shan in Vietnam, when a barrage of North Vietnamese 50 caliber machine gun fire hit his helicopter, taking it down with all 21 Marines on board. On the ground, Ralph managed to kill 4 enemy soldiers before becoming unconscious. He was rescued and awoke 6 weeks later in a military hospital to find out that he was the only Marine, the only person to survive that crash. Ralph was severely injured over much of his body, and both of his kneecaps were shattered. He would eventually lose the leg, and over the years endured 53 surgeries, and of course constantly suffered with pain for many years. But he kept a positive attitude, was friendly to all, especially those who came to do business with him at City Hall, and that's not easy. At this time, I'd like to introduce a very special guest, a former Marine who fought in Vietnam, born in Dorchester, now a resident of Medford. Again, that Malden-Medford bond. An attorney, friend of Ralph and Claire Kenty. Peter Hoban is originally from Dorchester. He served as a scout sniper in Vietnam, assigned to Hotel Company in the very same 2nd Battalion with Ralph Kenty. Even though they were in separate companies, they were good friends. Peter will now tell you how brave Ralph was in Vietnam and about the battles that they fought in together and somehow managed to survive. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marine hero, Peter Hoban.
It's a very honored time to be here, and I thank Kevin and all the people who put this together for Ralph. I would address in particular some remarks about Ralph's service, particularly to the Kenty family and his daughters, because they didn't hear much about Ralph. They were so young. What you have to understand, when both his daughters were very young when Ralph passed away. Ralph got in country March of '68. I got in country a month before him. I had been at Way City, and our rear was Phu-Bai. When Ralph came in, I met him, and he was always saying, "Where you from?" Boston. And there was an immediate bond. He and I hit it off going forward. Ralph was a couple years, it was always like my older brother. Ralph was just an amazing guy. So he got assigned to Fox Company. We're up at Contienne, and just a couple of stories. He's up at Contienne. We're in Operation Pegasus in the Quezon. On the 19th of May, which was hosted 68, coincidentally 50 years ago, right around this time period, Ralph was a M79 man with first platoon. Fox Company was leaving Quezon, going up on a road sweep up towards Kalu. 2 days before, my company had fought at this field 471, and he killed about 50 NVA and wounded quite a few of them. And usually when you had a combat like that, the NVA would come back after you. Well, unfortunately, Fox was the company that was out there on the road sweep. They were ambushed by about 1,500 NVA. Started 6 o'clock in the morning. It ended by 10. In 4 hours, there were 74 casualties. Ralph's first platoon, there was 9 men in his squad at that time. There was 3 survivors of that. First platoon got literally overrun. They fought hand to hand. I was up at 471. We were watching, this was surreal, in the valley where they were getting hit. Bravo Company 3rd tanks came out. They lost 3 tanks, and that was from the RPGs. And Ralph's first platoon was getting swept over. Every officer was killed. The platoon sergeants, Ralph became one of the senior men. Listening to what happened, we could not fire directly because they were too close. Ralph, we could hear him, and at the time I didn't know who it was. We heard somebody calling mortifies back at 81s, back at the Quezon, for direct fire on it, to drop it right on the positions. That broke that NVA attack. And then other companies went out and dropped airstrikes. The survivors of that was Ralph. They fought hand to hand, ran out of ammunition. That lasted 6 hours. 2 days later, I got back into Quezon. I went up to see who the survivors were. Then I found out with Ralph and his buddy Schnelly and the other guy that had survived that. So, again, it's devastating casualties. They're regrouping. This is where the Marine Corps, what my brother just alluded to, they had so many casualties, they went back to the battalion rear and grabbed everybody and said, you're now going to be grunts. Get up here with Fox Company. So they put them into Fox Company. They tried to take Fox out for a while to just orientate the new guys. 3 weeks to the day, 9th of June, Fox Company's convoy coming from Kalu. Ralph was on that. They lost 30 guys being on ambush. They were dressed, these NVA and Chinese advisors were dressed up in Marine Corps gear. Ralph's squad got off, Ralphie and his squad went up, and they killed about 15 of them who were doing the ambush. And that saved the rest of the convoy.
Now you know why your dad is considered a hero. It's men like Ralph Kenty and Peter Hoban who inspired me to join the Marine Corps towards the end of the Vietnam War. This year we commemorate the tragic loss of 58,000 American servicemen and women in Vietnam. 1968, the year Ralph was injured and so many were killed. That was the most devastating year with the most casualties in the Marine Corps in the 10+ years of fighting in Vietnam. Ralph Kenty was honorably discharged and retired due to disabilities from the Marine Corps on May 31st, 1969. His address upon discharge was 37 Chandler Road, just around the corner from this location. For his service in Vietnam, Ralph Kenty was awarded the Vietnamese Service Medal, Vietnamese Campaign Medal, and is recipient of the Purple Heart Medal, as well as many other awards, and probably should have been put in for the Navy Cross. Maybe we can still look into that, get some politicians involved. I remember meeting Ralph years ago when I came home on leave. Though I didn't know him, he was a friend of my father and hundreds of other Maldonians. They all had the utmost respect for both Ralph and his father. There are 3 men who told me about, recently, who told me about a great man, how great a man Ralph Kenty was. Well, one is gone, it was my dad. The other, Paul Condon, who's here with us today, and Joe Conley, who actually organized all of this and got all of you here today to remember his friend, Ralph Kenty. We also have with us today Karen Anderson, former city clerk for the city of Malden, who was Ralph's boss at City Hall. So where's Karen? She's in here somewhere. There she is. Thank you, Karen. I thought you could hide on me back there, huh? For the last 40 years or so, I have shared something special with Ralph Kenty. Back in the late 70s, there was a plaque dedicated in the city council chambers in City Hall with 20 names of Malden Marines who are members of the Marine Corps League. I'm proud to say that my name is in the same column on that plaque with Ralph as a member of that elite group with men like Joe Crokin and Paul Callahan. Ralph Kenty, Mr. Kenty, I should say, was married to Claire Elaine Donahue, who sadly also passed away too young, 16 months after Ralph died. She died on April 14th, 1989, just 2 weeks after turning 40. And her brother's with us here today. We have some of Mr. Kenty's family with us today, but I'm going to introduce his daughter, Dr. Jessica Drain Kenty, to come up, say a few words about her dad, and introduce the family so I don't mess it up. Jessica?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for all coming. Kate and I really would like to thank you for joining us today to honor our late father, Ralph Francis Kenty. A great many people contributed to making today possible, and I'd like to take a moment to thank them. First, we'd really like to thank the City of Malden for approving the dedication. Our father was a lifelong resident, a graduate and senior class president of Malden High School, and a longtime employee in the city clerk's office at Malden City Hall. And so this city was home to our father, and so for him to be honored in this way, in the city he loved best, is just really most appreciated. And so thank you, Mayor Christensen, for your remarks and for representing the city of Malden today. We really appreciate this ceremony. We'd also like to thank the Veteran Service Director, Kevin Jarvis, thank you, who works very hard every day to recognize the sacrifice of Malden's veterans and their families. And we are grateful for your recognition of our dad's service to this country and for coordinating the event today, so thank you. And thank you to Peter Hoban for sharing his memories of our father's heroism today. He's right that Kate and I really didn't know these stories, and so we greatly appreciate hearing them, and we'd welcome anyone to share stories later on today if you are able to join us after the ceremony. There just really are no words to relay how grateful we are to hear about our father's service in Vietnam and the work he did over there in his sacrifice. And we know there are many families who don't get to enjoy a moment like this. We got to have him. I exist because he was able to survive that. And there are many parents who lost their sons who didn't get to have that joy. And thanks, finally, we need to thank one of our father's very best friends and fellow Marine, Joseph Conley. Joe has been, Joe has been a part of our family my entire life. I don't remember not knowing Joey and his beautiful wife, Diane, we call Dee Dee. Joe has been the one who would drop by and visit. He would stop in all the time when he was on shift and had a moment to drop over, and he continued to do so even after our father died and visited our mom. And then even after our mom died, he would check in on our grandparents, and he would check in on Kate and I. Until our grandparents passed away, he checked in with our grandparents. And so really he was doing what my father would have wished he could have done himself. He kept tabs on Kate and I throughout our lives, and so this is a true friend. He's someone who honored his friendship even in death. So we just appreciate all you've done, Joe, to make today's dedication ceremony possible and for being such a great friend to our parents.
Amen.
Thank you.
Ralph Kenty was one of the first victims of Agent Orange. He suffered from leukemia from his service in Vietnam, which had a devastating effect on his body. Ralph Kenty died on December 28, 1987, after a short but very productive life, faithfully serving his country, his community, and his family. Ralph had come home from Vietnam after being severely wounded. He married Clara Lane Donahue, and they had 2 beautiful daughters. When asked about his service and injuries, Ralph would tell you that Malden lost 19 men in Vietnam and about the thousands of others who served and were wounded. As Peter said, he didn't want any medals, awards. He just kind of wanted to leave it alone, I guess, but he did remember all his veterans. His father, Ralph W. Kenty, also served in the military during World War II, and he served the city of Malden, was a proud member of that World War II generation. The men and women who served in World War II saved our world from utter devastation and tyranny. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me today as we officially dedicate this memorial square to Corporal Ralph F. Kenty, Vietnam veteran, Purple Heart recipient, hero from Malden. I want to thank our Malden Police Honor Guard today. They're Lieutenant Peg McDonald, Sergeant Scott Carroll, Sergeant Mike Castelletto, Officer Kevin Killian. Our flag stands for freedom, which has come at a great cost to veterans like Ralph Kenty and many of you. As we pass this location in the future, we will always remember Ralph's service and his sacrifice, serving his nation in Vietnam, serving his family in Malden and the community of Malden. He answered his nation's call and always did his best for his country, his family, and his family can be very proud of him. At this time, please welcome Dan Norton of the Kevin Barry Pipes and Drums, who will play the Marine Corps hymn in honor of Corporal Ralph Kenty and all you Marines in attendance. Dan? Thank you, Dan. As you can see on the Memorial Square sign, if you look at it from the front, it it's in larger letters, Corporal Ralph F. Kenty Memorial Square, so those driving by or walking by can read it easily. On the back, when you stand on this side, it says, in memory of Corporal Ralph F. Kenty, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam. I started this many years ago because a lot of these memorial squares would just say, you know, Sergeant John Smith Memorial Square, but who was he and where did he serve? So now we have a little bit of history on it. At this time, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and the family would like to invite everyone back to the Hibernian Hall